Welcome, welcome, everyone. Good evening. How's everyone doing? Mike Davirley here, one of the partners of College Inroads. Happy to be with you this evening as we talk through the college search. I know we're right at the middle of the hour, and I'm sure there'll be a few extra folks joining. But just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. We're doing this in a Google Meet format. We used to do this all in Zoom, so there's some technical glitches. I apologize. We're still kind of getting used to the whole Google Meet system. This is being recorded, so if you need to go back and reference it at any point, you can certainly do so. All of these recordings, these monthly webinars, are housed in each student's portal under the monthly webinar little folder, so you can always go back and listen to previous sessions. So tonight, we're going to dive into the nitty and the gritty on college searching. If you have questions as we go through, it's kind of a smaller group, so you can just unmute yourself and talk. Or if you prefer to chat, there is a chat function on your toolbar, and you can text that in. Although tonight might be easier if you just unmute yourself. Usually I have my partner in crime, Anne-Marie Hatfield, with me, but she couldn't attend tonight, so it might be easiest if you just jump in and ask questions. So that's completely all good. Let's see, other things that are on the docket. I know that a lot of students have just taken the March SAT or are doing a school day test. So those results are coming due. That all kind of feeds into the college search process. One of the things, just as an administrative note, our system, the portal is really, really great, but it does not notify us if you update your SAT or ACT results. So if you get some new results, just text us and say, hey, I just put in my new results, and we'll be sure to review those and comment. All right, so we're going to go ahead and begin. Just give me a second here, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me pull up the presentation. Yeah, this is always the fun part. Okay, sharing screen, entire screen, and I'm going to share screen too. Okay, there we go. Okay, so hopefully everyone can kind of see the slideshow. Okay, here we go. Okay, great. So let me back space here just a little bit. Okay, so yep, creating your targeted college list here this year. And of course, yeah, there's a lot to cover in this. We're going to cover who's involved, what are the roles and responsibilities, what can you expect from that, what's the ultimate goal in terms of creating a college list, what does that timing look like, what other extra special things should I be looking at when searching for a school. We'll certainly cover some of those things tonight. And then also, hey, what has changed since we as parents have navigated this whole process many, many moons ago. And yeah, lots has changed. Even this past week, the Department of Education going through some significant structural changes. Yeah, there's going to be lots and lots of change this year. We just know that. Okay, so besides the Department of Education kind of making an exit, here are some of the major things that I've seen just over the past couple of years happening. Students are very portable. In other words, we can go to out-of-state colleges, and back in the day, many of us stayed in state, and most of us stayed pretty local. So over the last 30 or so years, definitely students have been looking at many, many colleges, not just here in Texas, but in many other places too. So that's interesting. It also poses some challenges because many of us don't live in places like California, where lots of their schools, especially their most popular schools, have extremely impacted majors and student bodies, meaning that they're really full just of their own in-state residents. Or if you're applying to like a place like University of Georgia, well, a lot of their seats are coveted because they have the Hope Scholarship, which basically gives a lot of their in-state students lots of advantages to stay in state and go to a place like UGA or Georgia Tech. So it makes it really difficult for us to gain acceptance into those types of schools from afar. There's a lot of choices. Yep, there's lots of majors, the 6,500 of them. There's 2,700 four-year colleges. I live in Mexico, and down here, there's not that many majors nor that many choices for sure. So there's a lot of thought that really goes into this whole process of carefully selecting a college and a major, which, by the way, I didn't do. When I was in your shoes, students, I chose 2 schools, which is definitely too few to make applications to. So the finance picture is also super, super different, obviously, from in yesteryear. There's also a lot of selectivity ever since, well, since the beginning of this century. There's been a creeping, we'll see some charts on this, there's been a lot of changes in terms of selectivity, but post-COVID, it's even more pronounced because of the next bullet point, which is the Common App and the Coalition App really taking off. Mainly the Common App has won the race between the Coalition and other Universal App, but when the pandemic hit, colleges were reporting getting maybe between 28 and 35% more applications through their door, just because of the fact that things were going test optional. So that's hitting us. And additionally, there's something that in the industry they call the demographic cliff, where back in 2007, 2008, when we had the financial crisis, people hit pause on having kiddos. And so there are now 4 million fewer students, heading to college than there were 10 years ago. So that has, especially like small and mid-sized private liberal arts colleges, probably their VPs of enrollment are up at night worrying about that for sure. There are all sorts of other non-traditional paths to get into college. We see that at UT and A&M, and many schools also are finding alternative ways to get students into their pipeline. And of course, we're getting lots of sophisticated marketing from the colleges, which provides a lot of interesting information, but also sometimes information overload, right? When you go to the internet, there's just so much. You can go to ChatGPT, you can go to search engines, and just get an enormous amount of data. So tonight, we're just going to break it down into the basics to make it manageable. That's my goal. Who's in charge of this whole thing? Well, it is definitely a team effort. The consultant that you as a student are working with, your educational consultant, their job is to meet with you, get to know you, take a look at your resume, look at your transcript, look at your grade trends, look at the SATs or ACTs if you have those, handle questions, and ultimately take you through a process to provide a targeted list of colleges. Typically, this list of colleges isn't going to be more than, say, 20 to 25 colleges unless you guys request more than that. And sometimes we do see that. We'll have students sometimes that are academically really talented and they want to see more options, or students who are athletes and want to see a lot of options because of the recruiting process. So that's really the highest and best use of your consultant, is to provide that initial list of schools, to handle questions about those schools. And if you get stuck, to be able to turn to that person and say, hey, I'm having a really hard time narrowing from the list that you've provided down to the target number, which has traditionally been 8 to 10 colleges for the final college list. The student, I cannot emphasize this more, but it's your responsibility to research the schools because it's your future, right? These are opportunities for you to grow and to have fun and to launch yourself into your professional and adult life. But in the end, it's your choice. You and your parents, It's your future and their money typically going to college. So we've always told students, hey, you're in charge of your final list. We're not going to be the ones that say you can't apply here, or yeah, you need to absolutely apply to this other school. We're not going to strong arm you into those decisions. My first roommate at the Naval Academy lasted a whopping 9 hours. I'm pretty sure that that person didn't take responsibility for their own research into the school. So anyway, all that being said, we don't want that to happen. We want you to be really happy with the choice of schools that you have and for your final choice. Parents, it's your responsibility to have discussions with your student around finance, really fit in finance. But a lot of times we'll, on our intake form, receive comments like, hey, we'll figure out the finances later. It's not that important. But sometimes that does become really important. You'll see some of the schools are $80,000, $90,000 plus per year. And sometimes parents are like, hey, wait a second, this is just an undergraduate. Is that 4 years or is that 1 year? So yeah, in our system, it's reporting to you 1 year costs. So absolutely, I'll show you some resources that you guys can use to nail down what that final bottom line is going to look like. Also, coordinating college visits. I know that tends to be really difficult because everyone's really exceptionally busy in this day and age. So helping your student, get through the process. If you see, things that are stalling out and you guys are having conversations going, what's happening? Absolutely get on the horn, go through the portal, text us, send a smoke signal, whatever it takes. We'll be right there to support you. Okay, so what is our goal, as a company? And I want to talk about our bias. When I founded this company, I'd been a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch, and to me, the finance piece of it was extremely important to make sure that parents were not crashing their retirement plans to pay for college. So affordability has always kind of been on our back of our mind through the entire time we've been in existence. But we really want to find an affordable, realistic group of schools that give a great education. That's the main thrust for us. So we're thinking of quality, affordability, the programming, the majors and amenities and things like that. Those kinds of end up more toward the bottom of the list, but quality is there. We also subscribe to something that we call student positioning informally. What that basically means is that a portion of our list needs to be paid attention to so that we're positioned in a really strategically superior way, either through SATs or GPA or both. Why is that important? Well, yes, of course, for admissions purposes, that's really important. But for finances, the money is just really disproportionately allocated to those students that are at the top of the pile. So that's why we've always emphasized, hey, make sure you're studying for the SAT and ACT. Even though many schools are test optional, some of the more selective schools have basically self-selecting applicant pools, meaning that everyone has very, very high GPAs. Everyone's got a 3-page resume. Everybody has done, things like starting nonprofits or whatever. The idea is if we come in with some of these basic traits that are really high GPA, high SAT, ACT scores, especially for these more selective schools, then we get into the position of being competitive, with essays, short answer questions, things of that nature. So 8 to 10 applications, I kind of mentioned that before. That's just kind of a baseline. If it's 7, I'm not going to scream. If it's 13, I'm not going to scream. I do remember a student 2 years ago who applied to 25 colleges. Gang, that's just a lot of work, for the student. And usually when people apply to 25 schools, they're not applying to less selective schools. They're applying to more, hyper competitive schools. So that particular student had over 100 essay submissions. So we're talking that person became a professional applier to colleges. Now, we were there to support that, but ultimately 8 to 10 tends to be safe. And then lastly, I would talk about balance a little bit. Generally speaking, over the course of the last few years, I've found that achieving balance within the list has become more challenging because the colleges have become much more selective, and we'll give you some examples of that. But I think it's important for us to have fallbacks, or whatever you want to call it, on the list. And we need to research those and be sure that, hey, even if all the wheels fall off the bus, even the ones that are down on my list would be acceptable for me. We certainly don't want you to apply to a school that you don't want to get into at all, or never would attend, just for, oh, Mike told me I needed a fallback. No, we want to make sure that all of the schools on your list would be acceptable. And these factors absolutely vary from student to student. So these are just good baselines to think about. Okay, so what does balance in the college list look like? Traditionally, it's 1 or 2 reach type of schools. And honestly, gang, I start to think about reach, stretch and reach schools with schools that have lower than 20% acceptance rates. And there's a lot of those out there. There's dozens and dozens of those. They're the most visible colleges. So having a couple of those on a list, yeah, great. Having a core of 6 or so, what I would call fit or target schools, that's wise. That's where our SAT and ACT scores are putting us in the upper part of the applicant pool. Our GPA looks really good compared to last year's enrolled class at the schools. And then finally, a few safety institutions that, yeah, we have a very, very good chance of gaining acceptance to. Now, luckily, there are some safety-ish kinds of schools that are also very visible and very nice institutions to attend. But this last piece of the puzzle, the financial fit, sometimes that is also really important to make sure that we have a few schools on our list. And traditionally, these are in-state public colleges that would provide us a good quality of education, usually at the lowest possible cost. Okay, so that's generally speaking, the overall formula. But again, if you're a recruited athlete, that could balloon. That could be 20 schools that you apply to. Or if you're somebody who really wants to get into musical theater, yeah, we're probably going to need to apply to more than just 8 colleges. And yeah, I've also seen students that said, hey, I'm top 6% and top 5% now for the class of 26. I'm auto-accepted, let's say, to UT Austin. I'm happy in the College of Liberal Arts if I don't get my main major. Really, I just want to shoot the moon. Okay, perfect. We understand going in that we are using a totally different strategy than the one that I outlined before. All right. And then, it does pay to kind of look at the admissions folks and what they're looking for. And this particular slide was taken from the Independent Education Consultants of America survey that they do every year. They survey 300 or 400 of the most selective schools and ask them, hey, what's the priority, in order of these different things. And so you can see up here, number 5 is a well-written essay, the SATs and ACTs being consistent with the GPA, rigor and curriculum, all that kind of good stuff. Those top 5 are really super important for us. When I was in the military, in the Navy, we studied philosophers, we studied Sun Tzu. He said, know thyself, know thy enemy, and in 100 battles you will not know defeat. Well, here's not the enemy, but this is what we're up against, so we need to know, we want to show up with all these things in our back pocket as much as possible. There's no perfect application out there, but these things tend to be the most important elements for a college application. And then this is kind of what's happening in the last, decade or two, in terms of, this is just a grouping of a few of the most selective colleges in the country. And you can see their acceptance rates going from very, very selective down to hyper competitiveness. And, there's many others that follow this same pattern, but I just wanted you to kind of get a sense of, hey, what was it like back at the turn of the century versus what it is now 25 years later? And it's just kind of gone straight down. Then here are a few colleges in terms of acceptance rates over time. Again, roughly the same time period. And you could see Boston University, for example, was moderately selective, and now they're down under 20%, and that's going to be a reach for a lot of students. Same thing with Vandy, same thing for UNC Chapel Hill, Northwestern is really super hyper competitive these days. So you get the picture with the selectivity. Let's just, look at this and say, okay, now I understand kind of in numbers what's generally happening out here. How do I fit this knowledge into a balanced college list? And then for UT, it's always worthwhile, I think, talking about UT since we are based in Austin. This is kind of what's happening. This is the most recent application data for the class of 2029 graduating from UT. They had 90,000 applicants. The previous year, they had 70, gang. They had a 24% increase in the number of applications. Their number of freshman slots did not change. It's about 9,000 people for their freshman class, maybe a touch more. The top 6% last year was auto-admitted, so that was about 12,400 students, leaving about 3,800 students who gained acceptance outside of the non-top 6%ers, and people came in from out of state. So you can kind of see what's happening there. Now, interestingly enough, about 55% of the students that were accepted actually, quote unquote, yielded and showed up at UT and committed. So yeah, roughly 45% of the students who gained acceptance to UT either couldn't afford it, didn't want to come, got a better offer someplace else, decided to go elsewhere. So that seems surprising, but that is the truth of the math. And then, so if we're outside of the top 6%, if we, are not there in our high school graduating class, it's a really low percentage. We're talking Ivy League percentage to get into UT. Now, can you do it? Yes. Have we done it? Yes. So we just need to pay attention to all of the hard factors, which are the data points, the transcript, the GPA, the SAT scores, but also super important, the non-soft, the soft factors, which are the resume, the teacher recommendations, the essay responses become really outsized important for those students who are applying to UT. Okay, some research. I want to talk about research a little bit because I find this is an area that students can always do and do more of to better their chances of gaining acceptance, especially to these hyper-competitive schools. A lot of times, just in general, I'll hear students say, hey, I'd love to go to Northwestern or whatever, and I'll just ask, hey, well, tell me about that. Well, it's a really great school. It's high quality, small classes, things of that nature. It's well thought of. It's highly ranked. These are all true. However, the colleges want to hear more. They want you to be digging down into their offerings and really matching yourself to what they offer with a mind thinking about, hey, how can Northwestern specifically propel me to a goal that's well beyond Northwestern? Okay, so be thinking about that vision that you guys have as students for your life beyond college. Now, I'm going to stop right there. When I was in your shoes, I did not have that vision. That was not something that was part of my DNA. I just wanted to go to college. It was pretty simple back then. But now, in this hyper-competitive environment, we need to stretch ourselves and be thinking about those future events, that future life of yours, even if it's nebulous, even if it's not super clear. Talking about your motivations to get to ultimate goals with these colleges, I think is really, really helpful. So let me pop over to the student portal here really quick and just kind of show you what's going on there in terms of research. So give me just a sec to change the share here. And while I'm doing that, are there any questions that I can answer while I'm doing that? Okay, all of that hopefully is making some sense. Okay, so let me stop this share and go to another one. Okay. Okay, so I always feel like I'm flailing around here. Okay, so let me go to a different tab. Okay, so I'm just going to get into our portal. I have these tabs already open, but I just can't seem to access them. So Let me go to Joe Doe. And then we're going to log in to your guys' portal. Okay. So hopefully you can see Joe Doe here. This is what it looks like, students, you've seen this when you log into your College Inroads portal. So to research schools, all you have to do is go into your college tab, which is great. Now, Joe's, kind of further along the process, notionally speaking. This isn't a real student. He's already applied, to schools, but this is really what you start to see as a second semester junior. You're going to see suggested colleges here, and then your my list of schools. So first things first, you can use these 6 little dots to drag and drop your school choices based on your preference. So I would encourage you to do that. Now, nobody at this stage has color coding for your college list, but that's going to come toward the end of the semester as we get test scores, some more updated data. And you can see down here, this is the probability. Now, I get questions on this every year, like, hey, are you using AI to do this? Nope, this is little old me or your educational consultant who's going to say, hey, based on the attributes that I see, based on the resume, based on all of our conversations, I think Baylor, for example, is going to be one where we're going to gain acceptance pretty likely. Okay. Whereas TCU might be a maybe, UGA might be a maybe, and you can come down and see, okay, UT's a stretch, MIT, Duke, and Boston are going to be, far reaches. So when we want to go in and do research on the school, all you have to do is click on the name of the college, and it's going to show a lot of data, which is really nice. It's pretty well laid out. The things I tend to look at are the overall acceptance rate, the cost. I come down and pay attention to how do they do admissions? Do they have early decision, early action? Or is it just regular admissions? What's the SAT and ACT range? Again, the positioning concept kind of says, hey, if we're in the upper quartile of the applicant pool, we have a better chance of gaining again, just period, end of story. Now, GPA data is not available for Baylor. They just chose not to provide it to the government, so it's not there, but most colleges do share that. And then down here, it's really helpful to see admissions considerations. And you'll see lots of difference between schools here. So they're saying, for example, GPA is really super important, whereas an interview doesn't have any weight at all. It's not even considered, forget about it. So you're not going to interview at Baylor. Okay. And then all these other things are just considered, et cetera. So standardized test scores, rigor, and GPA. That's really in keeping with kind of what we saw in that earlier slide. And then the essays being important. So great. Let's do one more and just see the differences here. That was Baylor. Let's look at TCU, since it's kind of a synonym. Much lower acceptance rate, similar cost. Now they have 3 different types of applications. They have early decision, which is the binding contract. They have an early action, which is not binding. And you can see if you apply ED to TCU, you have a 60% admit rate, where if you do early action, it may only be 13. Now, I think this data is incorrect, but okay. Maybe they were having a bad enrollment season and had to, accept a bunch of people regular decision. That's what that reads to me like. And you can see again, this particular notional students is well positioned. And you can see that, yeah, there's quite a few more things that are showing up in the important category here for this particular school, including volunteerism and work. So if I wanted to start to get down in the funnel and get lower and get more granular detail, I'm going to go to the FISC guide. And if you've never seen FISC guide, boys, this is a treat. This gives a 50,000-foot overview of most colleges. Not all of them have a FISC guide, but man, is this helpful to read through just to get a sense of what is happening on campus. What are they about? What are some standout programs, things like that. And if that helps and you're still interested, then I go to this research tab and start to dive into some of these items. Now, of these, if I just have a few minutes, I'm going to go to niche. That gives you a scorecard. It gives you reviews. But the most important thing that niche does for you is it gives you a scatter plot. So if you get a free account from niche, you can enter your GPA, your SAT, ACT scores, and then really see, hey, where do I stand in the applicant pool? So that's very helpful. Past that, we're going into the college's website to do a bunch of research. So today's session's not about researching. I just wanted you guys as parents to see all of these tools are here and available to your student to do the research. Okay, so let me go then back to the slide presentation. And give me 1 second here. Okay, I'm going to stop this presentation and start this again. Okay, so then now hopefully you can see the slides. Okay, great. So we kind of ended here at the college website. So beyond the numbers, though, realize that these items are going to play heavily in admissions decision, the transcript. I get questions, especially usually February, March, about the senior year or the next year in the cycle's class load, but especially now for folks who are going to be seniors next year. Hey, do I take 2 off periods? Or hey, do I need to take APs next year? Hey, do my grades really matter? And the answer is yeah, they will matter. And you do want to push yourself really hard in your senior year so that you can go into your freshman year of college really well prepared. Like I tell students, man, my high school didn't even offer calculus. I tried to get it. I didn't go to college with calculus. Then I had to do 3 levels of calculus as a history major. It was brutal. So yeah, you want to push yourself to do the advanced math, science, things like that, especially if it's related to your major, and especially if you're applying to selective schools. The resume, yep, that's going to play into the equation, because essentially, yes, we want to be able to submit a very nice resume to the college, but also that resume forms the basis of the activities list on your application. So you do want to spend time in it. Now, you guys have been doing a great job with those. I really have appreciated this grouping of students has done a wonderful job of looking at the resume, taking it seriously. But if it's been many moons since you've looked at the resume, it's time to dust that off, definitely. Why? Because the first place where you're going to use this is usually with teacher recommendations, and those will come starting over the summer. Essays are going to be important. We've already started helping students brainstorm for the class of 26, their initial supplemental essays, and then the short answer questions. So the SAT, ACT stuff, yes, we want to prepare for that. That's just the tip of the iceberg. What about rankings? I get a lot of questions from parents. What role do they play in the admissions game in choosing a list? Well, remember I mentioned Niche, that website. They have rankings, just like the U.S. News and World Report, Kiplinger's, all that. To me, those are all self-reported data points that the college has put into the ethers. And yeah, Kiplinger's, all these places, the ranking agencies suck up all that data and then rack and stack the schools. I'm just looking for, hey, are we known for business? Are we within the top, let's say, 100 colleges? Because no one's going to be able to tell the difference between the number 80th college or the 82nd school. No, there's just no way of discerning that. So are we known for the programming is what I really want to know. Is it okay to change directions as I create my college list? Yes, 100%. This is a concern, I think, for a lot of folks. I met with a student today saying, I know it's going to be business, but I'm not sure what flavor. Hey, that may change the list. If we apply to marketing versus accounting, that can change things dramatically. Or, yeah, I went up and visited a college in Chicago, and wow, it was a lot colder or windier up there, whatever. No problem. We can revamp college lists. Okay. We just need to know if you're having troubles or if you don't like your initial list or whatever, we need to know why and how we can help. Okay. So the major, the geography, visit experiences, lots of other things can change the list. And then when is the ideal to begin the college search process? Well, freshman year, yeah, that's a little early. It's nice to go to college fairs and things like that. Sophomore year, yeah, you're getting warmer, especially second semester, definitely go to college fairs. Sophomore year, if I had a sophomore right in front of me, I'd say, I'd probably visit a large public institution and a small private institution just to get a sense of things and do it locally. Junior year, though, yeah, this is the right time, especially right now. Most people are in the midst of doing their research. And then senior year, yep, it's kind of late, to be switching things around in the senior year, especially since a lot of colleges, when they open up admissions in August, there's a floodgate that comes in during that time, and we try to be part of that, because at some schools like Texas A&M, if you're applying to business or engineering, we need to be applying in that first month. It's imperative, because they run out of spots even before their deadline hits. So anyway, that's a whole different story for a different day. But yeah, senior year is really too late to be really diving into the college list. In general, we really like to have a sense of the SAT or ACT range when creating a list. So if you're not a great test taker, don't sweat it. We're going to look at your transcripts really deeply, just as the college would. So if you don't have any standardized tests, we can use the PSAT, or you could do a mock test, and that would help your consultant with your college list. The rating of the schools list, I've already gone over that. That's going to happen this next month and into May. If you're a junior, I should say. And then just a couple of resources. I know there's tons out there, but my favorite search engine, it's not perfect, but it's really the best one and the easiest to use, is actually housed through the National Center for Education Statistics and the government's website. I'm hoping it's not going to get shut down. We'll see. But that's the one I like to use the most. It's very flexible. It's easy to really get some quality lists out of that as a starting point. You can compare colleges side by side at collegeresults.org, which is really helpful when you look at graduation rates and things like that. And then Niche, again, just gives a really nice view of a school. So what to do now? Be in contact with admissions reps as you research your schools. Things like, hey, how do I get an internship, or how does that process work at your school? I'm interested in doing some undergraduate research. How does that process happen? Hey, I want to go study abroad in Italy. How does that work? When could I do that? Do you have a center over there that I could study through, or do I study through an Italian college? How about your outcomes? If you're applying to business school, hey, how many of your students were picked up by, accounting firms last year or whatever? They have those answers. If they don't have the answers, they're going to reach out to the departmental level professors or chair to get the answers that you need. It's also helpful to build relationships with those admissions reps, especially if they track demonstrated interest. So doing in-person and virtual tours, that's great. It's super helpful to do. It's honestly, I think it's the most fun part of this entire process for students. You get to see the dorms. You get to see what your life is going to look like here pretty soon. And it really brings things into focus. So if you have some time, I highly recommend doing in-person visits at the college's website while colleges are in session. Now, if you have to go in the summer, that's okay too. If it's Trinity University with 1,300 students, I'd probably put that off till September. You can definitely do research on the college's website. Your consultant is obviously taking you there to do some of that research. Campus Reel is a great resource for doing virtual tours. So getting down into the weeds, looking at the curriculum, special courses, electives, professors, things like that help in the admissions process as they review your application. So doing that research on your school's list is great. Yep, we want to finish this semester strong, especially if you're a junior. This is your 6th semester. It's the last set of grades they're going to see prior to making admissions decisions for the most part, then prepping for the SAT and ACT. So what should my college look like when it's all done? 8 to 10 schools, maybe a few more, a few less, the right major, real basic, and great offerings. It's socially a very good fit. I like the kinds of students that go there. I think I'm going to gel well. I'll learn from them probably as much as I will from their professors. Academically, it's a great fit. There's lots of great things for me to dive into. I'm excited about what I'm going to study. I can see I'm going to be, filled by going to this particular institution or the set of institutions. Financially, it's affordable. We don't want to get into a school only to find out that, that's too expensive. Sorry, you can't go. That's a horror story. We don't want that. And then finally, balance, like we went back and talked about a few high flying schools, a bunch of fit schools, and a couple of schools that either are financial or safety schools for admissions. And then the ultimate litmus test, would I as a student attend any of the schools on my final list? That's a really great one to ask yourself. All right, I blew a lot of hot air at you guys in a short period of time. Typically, we take questions on the programming that we had for you tonight. When that wraps up, we'll open it up for any questions across the spectrum of things that might hit us, not only just in this session, but topics of discussion that go beyond this session. So I'm going to stop right there. Any questions? Okay, going once, going twice.
So can you say again, when should we start looking for like college tours? Like what what stage of the process we should be in?
Oh, absolutely. Usually college tours and researching colleges, the earliest time that I think it's really effective is second semester sophomore year. So if we're past that point, if we're in the junior year, definitely, we want to be looking at college tours. Great question. Others? Yeah, let's kick it off. Let's keep going, keep rolling. Okay, so we'll open up to any questions related to anything related to college. How's that?
Should we start speaking to admissions reps?
Okay, sorry. Can you rephrase that? I think I didn't catch the first part of your question.
When do we need to start contacting admissions reps and maybe getting some emails through?
Oh yeah, great question. So as soon as you have your school's list and you kind of have it narrowed down, that's when I'm doing research on the school. Typically, what happens is I'm on their website, I'm looking at things. I might have just looked at a different school, so I'm starting to cross compare things. Usually, questions start to arrive in my mind, and sometimes you just can't find the answer on the website. That actually happened to me in my application to UT as a graduate student. And I'll never forget, I did an in-person interview and I asked them a question about what I was looking at on their curriculum. And they're like, where did you find that? I'm like, it's on your website. They're like, that's the wrong stuff. We're going to take that down. So sometimes questions like that will show up. But anytime, once you've gotten your list and you've started to nail down that list to the 8 to 10 schools and you're kind of in that zone, that's a great time to reach out.
Would that be during junior year?
Typically it's junior year, yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Great question.
Well, I just had a question about that. So are you doing that to sort of make contact and have them recognize your name and have had some communication, or just because you have questions?
Oh, that's a great question. So traditionally, the best answer is, yeah, I authentically have questions. Now, when you go to your research page, each school, it says, how those considerations are for each college. You can see, does demonstrated interest matter to them? Do they care about that? Most of the time, they do. I mean, except for the most elite colleges. Let's just be honest. Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Stanford, Duke, they could care less if you contact them 1,000 times a day. Well, they don't want that, but you know what I'm saying. But if it's a mid-tier private school, a great example of that is Tulane. Tulane is a really selective private institution, and they absolutely track demonstrated interest. Talking to the admissions rep, visiting the campus, going to the information session at the high school. All of those kinds of things matter to them. So if in doubt, demonstrate interest. It would be my best advice to you. When I applied to the Naval Academy, I did not have the minimum math score to gain acceptance. You know what I did? I kept knocking on the damn door. And over time, I built a relationship with my admissions rep. And at the end, he's like, okay, I give up, man. You're too persistent. I'll take your admissions file to the committee. I'll see if I can jam you in sideways. Call me in a week. And I did. And he said, okay, Davila, you're in, but you're going to have a hell of a time with math. He was right. Yeah. So sometimes those relationships and that interest can pay off.
And if you do visit the college and maybe take a self-guided tour, or you take the actual tour, you'll just mention that in the essay? Or
Yeah, I would absolutely take the full, go to the information session, do the campus tour, the official one. And usually what happens is when you go into the admissions office, they have you sign in. So that's how they know you've actually been there. And then, yeah, absolutely. If you're crafting a supplemental essay saying, hey, this is the reason why I'm applying to XYZ school, it's great to be able to mention, yeah, I walked around campus, I talked to students, these were my impressions. I really fit because X or Y. Great questions. Keep them coming, gang. What else? All right. So again, it's been our pleasure to chat with you guys tonight. If you have more questions and are shy, don't hesitate to reach out through your portal. Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Hi there. I'm sorry, I typed the message in there. I guess it didn't get
Oh,
there.
sorry. Yeah, sorry. With me being a solo person here.
No worries.
Oh yeah. Okay. Can you
I just
compare the
wanted to
process of
compare the,
admissions and the school search for Europe?
process in the European universities, admission process, visiting schools, like what do they look for comparatively, and also the search feature for them, is that commensurate with the US schools?
Yeah, it's super different. Yeah, the whole thing is not as centralized or efficient as the Common App and things like that. It's fragmented based on country, so you really have to look and say, okay, is it going to be Britain with UCAS, their admission system, or is it some other school in the EU? What you tend to see, Josh, in the EU and Canada is that all these essays, these personal statements, all that stuff's all fluff to them. They could care less.
Yep.
It's really about hard, fast numbers, and it's usually grades. That's the main thing. A good example is I had a student this past cycle who was raised in the British system. She lived in Saudi Arabia, and she had 7 grades for her entire high school career. 7. Those were her A-level exams, and that's it. That's what either got her into college or not. So,
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a very, very different system. So we at Inroads, we're most, we've had students go to European institutions, but I would definitely not say we're experts on it because we really just focus in on US for the most part.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, others. All right, gang. Well, I hope you guys have a great night. I hope this is good food for thought for the dinner table for tonight or tomorrow. And again, we're real pleased to serve you. If there's anything else we can do, just let us know, okay? Have a great night. Bye-bye.
thank you.
Thank you, guys.